Firing a staff is, I think, one of the hardest things we have to do as business owners and managers. And when we do so, we need to be absolutely sure we're doing the right thing. The consequences for the staff member can be significant, especially if, for example, they're the sole breadwinner in the family. And if they're being fired for some form of gross misconduct, it's unlikely you're going to pay them any notice period. They will be basically dismissed, and that's the end of it. And even if they're a contractor, whatever, is the burden that can put onto you, and I know in my experience has put onto me, thinking about, did I make the right decision? Have I, potentially messed up this person's short-term financial situation, hopefully only short-term financial situation? Have I done that with a clear conscience? And having tools available to make that decision easier and be confident that there is proof beyond reasonable doubt that whatever the activity you are dismissing the person for is valid and genuine, then that can at least go some way to putting your mind or your soul or whatever at rest that it was the right decision, and even if it was a hard one. And today I want to explore a couple of ways which we have utilized some of the features within Google to make that decision and be confident it was the right one.
So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us, who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits, and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day, and this is Systemize Your Success.
Okay, so it's very rare that this happens in our business. In fact, we've in the past 7 years had to dismiss a total of 2 people out of probably around 40 odd staff members that have come and gone over that time for various reasons. But only 2 people have ever been dismissed for reasons I'm going to explain in this episode. The first one was due to exaggerating the time taken to complete work. So when they were tracking their time and sending us invoices for the work they were doing, we were starting to question how long activities were taking. And this went on for a period of time. And eventually we actually looked into it and found there was ways we could actually prove beyond any reasonable doubt that this person hadn't been working at the times they said they were, or doing the work that they put onto their invoice, or as we call it, the timesheet, the time tracker. We ask our staff to track all their time currently on a spreadsheet, so we can use that for understanding the capacity of the team, for process improvement, for them being able to give us an accurate invoice as well for the time that actually worked. And it's one of the most powerful things we use in our business, something I highly recommend. And there's good and bad ways to do that, I believe. And the reasons why you're doing it need to be genuine and not simply just to spy on your staff. And I'll cover this again in another episode coming up shortly. And I have just touched on this in the past, but we've actually updated our policies, and I've changed my mind on some of this, which I'll cover in a future episode. But for now, this is really about when you believe, for whatever reason, however you're tracking, or maybe it's just a gut feeling that this person that you're in question is extending the time, for example, that they are charging you for the work they're doing. And so I'm going to show you exactly how we discovered this and how we can prove beyond any reasonable doubt that this person didn't do that work during that time, and some really useful tips in the Google Admin Console, but also just in Google Documents as well. And something that you might not be aware of. I wasn't until I started really digging, but they're very, very powerful. And the second instance, again, using the same techniques, I was able to prove this beyond any reasonable doubt, that there were some manipulations on the amount of time tracked and charged, and the person in question denied it categorically. They said they must have been hacked. Someone must have had the password and logged in as them, so that's why their username was on the version history on the change log for the document. And that put me in a really difficult position, because I'd worked with that person for quite a few years and I trusted them, and so I wanted to believe them. I really wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that it wasn't true, just because I really like this person. As I said, I've worked with them for a long time. I had a relationship with them, a friendly relationship with them, and also, just the consequences of making a wrong decision and having to live with that. And I just was in a really difficult and dark place while I was making this decision to whether or not to let this person go. And thankfully, because of the tips I'm going to explain to you today, and if you are listening to this podcast on the podcast, I'm going to be explaining also this. You'll get everything from the podcast audio version, but I'm also going to share my screen. So if you do want to catch the more detail on how you find the talking about and what they look like, then you might want to jump over to YouTube or onto our core site, not core site, sorry, the podcast site. So systemizeyoursuccess.com. Find the episode page, and the video link there will be on there to the YouTube video where you can actually watch what I'm talking through as we're going through it now. So a couple of simple things that you may be aware of one of them. I don't think you may also be aware. You might not be aware of the second one. So we'll start with a simple one. And as I say, for the benefit of people watching the video, I'm just about to share my screen. And so what I'm showing on the screen now is a time tracking sheet. So however you track time, we're just looking here to say, look, this person on this particular day, and just to be clear, this is not the person in question at all. This is a current and a very good employee, but I just picked it as a random example to show how we can actually see exactly what work was done during the time that's being logged. And this is, just to be clear, anything that's happening within your Google Drives in this specific example, but there are other uses for the same techniques which you can explore if you need to. So what I got here is her invoice that she's provided for me, and she says that on the 25th of January, whatever, she's done 43 minutes work on this particular document. And maybe I want to question that. In this case, I don't. It's a totally valid, but maybe I do want to question that. And in the example I explained a few years ago now, the person had consistently logged excessive amounts of time doing work which really didn't justify the amount of time logged, and this was on an ongoing and consistent basis for a number of weeks. And we could see that the time she charged us for doing the work, and when we added it all up, it just didn't make sense. And then we wanted to say, okay, look, she's saying it took this long, we're saying it's not. It's sort of like, who's right, and how do we prove that? And that's what this is about. So here I can say, okay, great. So this person has been doing this work on the sheet. Now, the first way to look at this is to go to the version history of the actual document. In this case, it's a spreadsheet. So we can actually just open the spreadsheet up, and in there, we can go to our version history. So just basically go to the file menu, go to version history, and then see version history. And then we can find the date in question. So for example, this was it was the 25th of January, and it was at 7:40 a.m. And the time's tracked on here. I believe you just have to check the time zone is right, just to get it right, depending on what time they're logging in, and make sure that makes sense. And then I can see, okay, so on the 25th of January, then I can see there were some changes made. So I'm going to go to the entry which correlates with the time that they've logged, or it may just be a day if you're not exactly sure. And I can actually see then who is logged in and who is making changes. And as I actually click on each of the versions, and every single change is logged on here, I can actually see if you there's a button at the bottom that says show changes, which is clicked as default. I can actually see at that particular time, so in this case at 12 minutes past 8, at that time she actually clicked on this sheet exactly what changes were made. And I can compare maybe the day before. So if I go to the previous day, and then I can see, okay, well, what did the spreadsheet look like the day before or at the beginning of that session? And then what did the spreadsheet look like at the end of the time in question? And I can actually see, oh yeah, all these changes have been made. This is what's different about it. And in this case, it was actually just updating one column. It had the wrong URLs in. So she went through and systematically updated every single URL on this quite large spreadsheet, which is why, it took quite a long time to do it. But I can actually see every time she's logged in, I can see the consistency of her logging in. There's no gaps of like 15 minutes when she's gone off to get a cup of coffee and nothing's happened. It's actually a really easy way to sort of see the cadence of somebody's work. And just to be clear, I don't advocate that you're doing this on a regular basis, that this is something you go and spy on your staff and then get really worried about it and worked up. You'll have it in your gut when things aren't looking quite right, and it's not typically the one-off events. You can look at, if someone's logged an excessive amount of time for a piece of work, you think, how did that possibly take that long? And you really, you want to check, then this is a good way to do that really simply and easily. Now, this may be enough for you. be able to say, look, that person logged in. I know that person has got their own login. They use two-factor authentication, for example. And it's a good reason to put that on, because then it's almost impossible for somebody else to have logged in on their behalf. So if it says it was them that logged in, it probably was, or almost categorically was. But in my case, we didn't have two-factor authentication switched on. And despite me showing this evidence of the changes, etc., and this person in question being logged in, they denied it. They said, this definitely wasn't me. Somebody has hacked me. Somebody has manipulated this in order to make me look bad. And again, that, as I said, that put me in a pretty awkward position. So what I then did was research, how can I get some more detail about this, rather than just the changes that were made, but really specifically which user made these changes, and be absolutely sure where that person was located. And if we go into the admin console in Google, we have something called the reporting, and under there, something called audit and investigation. And on there, and I'm showing it on my screen at the moment, you can then set up filters. So in this case, I've set up a specific filter for the person that we're looking at in this example. And I've said between a couple of dates, so the day before, day after, and the person's login email, and then show me the events for that particular time period. So I can then actually go into the backend, if you like, and see the same thing I'm seeing on that version history. So I can see this person has been updating this thing we call the LW core site map PPP. Just for those people watching it on the screen, this is the document in question. And I can see that all those logs that we saw in the version history are duplicated on here. This is like the raw data, which actually is used to update that version history. But what we also get on here is the IP address. So we can actually see where this person was located in terms of which IP they're using, so which computer they're on, in effect, and therefore pretty categorically know that if this person uses their regular IP address, as in basically the computer in their home, and those changes were made to that document using that IP address, which is the same IP address they use on a regular basis, or they've done some work that they have said, yes, that definitely was me doing that work, but this one wasn't. Well, we can say, well, unfortunately, it's the same IP address and it's your login. So for me, that was enough categorical proof to suggest that actually the changes in question were made by that person at that time on her computer using her login. So with or without two-factor authentication, that was enough evidence for me to actually make the decision to dismiss that person. And although it was still an incredibly hard thing to do, I actually spoke to a lawyer friend of mine about it. I spoke to the business colleagues. I was just distraught about, is this the right thing to do, etc. But when I when I explained and showed them the evidence that I had, it was really a black and white decision. It was, the evidence was there, and therefore I had to make the decision. So that's it, really. Just to summarize what I've shown you today, or what I've talked through today, is that when we are questioning whether has somebody made a change to something that you want to then say, look, that was not the right thing to do. So for example, manipulating times, or manipulating some part of a sheet, or making some changes to some documents or whatever within your drive that then in a detrimental way, deleting documents, whatever it is, something that is an act of gross misconduct, I think that's the legal term for it, then we can actually identify by the version history what changes were made, when they were made, and who made them, really easily and simply, and in a lot of detail as well. And then if we use the audit investigation part of the admin console in Google, you can actually see the IP address as well to get absolutely categorical evidence that that was that particular person at that particular computer at that particular time doing those changes. So it all matches up, and it gives you quite a lot of evidence to go on. So I hope that's been useful. It's not something that I particularly like to have to talk about, but I think it's good to be honest. These things do happen from time to time. And as I said, it's very, very rare. In my experience, it's only happened twice in 7 years. And because of having a knowledge of the version history and also the backend in the admin console, it's enabled me to sleep with my decision, to sleep with my decision, to be happy or not happy, but be settled, that I did make the right decision. I've not, potentially screwed up this person's livelihood for the wrong reasons or made a mistake. And it's super hard when someone's categorically denying something, and I'm trying to be as honest person as I can, and I find like I think I'm one of the worst liars I've ever met, and so I want to believe people. And so for me, having this evidence was enabled me to make a decision that I can live with. So yeah, if you found this episode useful, if you like more stuff like this, please do leave a comment on whatever app you happen to be using right now, and please do leave a review and give us some star rating. 5 is always nice if you happen to be on Apple. And yeah, share this with your friends and colleagues if you think they might also find this useful. This is one thing that I think few people know about using an effective way, and it's quick and simple to do, and it allows you to as I say, either put your mind at rest that no, this was actually completely valid, it did just take longer than I thought, or actually no, there is something going on. And as I said, it's not something I do routinely. It's just there if I need it to give the evidence I need to make the hard decisions in business in these examples. Good. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for listening. And just as a quick note, we're back in the top 3% of all podcasts globally on Listen Note at the time of recording, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's it's thanks to you, our listeners, for making this happen. So a massive, massive thank you for being a part of this podcast. Thanks very much.